trigger prevailing wage and how those escalate costs for construction on certain improvements that businesses are looking to do, whether that's facade programs or even using it for new kitchen equipment. There is concerns about how that triggers prevailing wage, how that increases costs for those constructions. There's also some concerns related to timing about how going through the application process and coming forward before the city council. And of course, as mentioned, there's about $650,000 available in this fund. So it's quite limited in what we can work with and contribute to certain projects. To date, we haven't had, we've only received one application, which just came in the past couple of weeks to use this program. And so what staff has been researching is how we can address those concerns from the previous slide. And what we found is that the state labor code does allow for a public subsidy, and it considers it de minimis if we can meet two conditions. One is that the subsidy doesn't exceed a cost of $600,000, and that it is less than 2% of the total project cost. If a developer wanted to use our funds and can meet both of these conditions, it wouldn't trigger prevailing wage. And so there's many developers that are interested in looking at this through the Invest Palm Desert program. So again, listed the site-specific revenue sharing and ongoing other incentives. Where we think we can really apply the de minimis provisions are related to tax sharing agreements for TOT and possible sales tax, depending on the sales that would be generated from a specific site. We think a higher priced item such as automobile sales might be a good use of these funds, but to help hotels come in too, we think the transit occupancy tax sharing agreement will work for them as well. The requirements for the Invest Palm Desert program, there's an application that has to be submitted. They do have to demonstrate that there's a public purpose. They need to show us that there's a financing gap and demonstrate what the return from the use of these funds would be to the city. Ultimately, if approved by the council, there is an agreement that with reporting requirements for the use of those funds. Here listed at the bottom, we think there is a benefit in using this provision specifically for tax sharing because there's no money that's committed up front by the city. It's mostly going to be reimbursed through the sales or TOT taxes generated or remitted to the city. We mentioned we had a number of discussions with developers, specifically hotel developers that are interested in looking at this program. We've highlighted some parcels here along the interstate corridor. On the far left is Monterey Avenue, and then we have the Cook Street interchange there. Those parcels shown in red are parcels that we have current hotel interest in. This is to continue developing out hotels that are in that range that are there now. So we're looking at extended stay hotels, maybe more like the Fairfield Inn, Holiday Inns that are in that area. And we have interest for 3 hotels along Cook Street and an additional hotel on Monterey. They're interested again in using this program. The property along Monterey is the Monterey Crossing development where we have Chick-fil-A. That developer has the back half of that development still available to be developed. And they are looking at a hotel use and an automobile sales use for that site. And so we're thinking with the de minimis provisions, we could apply it for a sales agreement here or a TOT agreement. But again, we think these are an interesting program to use, allowed by the state, and through a reimbursement agreement. Again, the city doesn't put any money up front. So this would have to go through some sort of application process through Invest Palm Desert. Ultimately, it would come before the city council for consideration prior to approval or entering into any of these agreements. That completes the report.
Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Truby.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question. So the de minimis provisions restrict us to 2% of the less than 2% of the total project. In your experience, has that been a big enough carrot to put in front of a developer and really incentivize them to develop, or is this done in conjunction with other? It just doesn't seem like a lot to me.
It isn't a lot. It's, we can't exceed $600,000. So you would need about a $30 million project. But what we're hearing from, especially our hotel developers, with rising interest rates, the lenders are requiring them to put more money forward. And so, and with some of these locations being close to the freeway, there's additional construction costs to kind of mitigate the railroad for air quality and some vibration. So they are interested in using this program because any amount of commitment that the city can show, it helps them get additional lending.
I just have one question. The goals look ideal, for these particular sites. My memory is that when we established the Invest Palm Desert program, one of our goals was to attract distinctive businesses to Palm Desert, or to support entrepreneurs who might be wishing to establish a distinctive business, so that we don't just become mixed SoCal. So is that still an objective within Invest Palm Desert? How does that fit?
Yes, this is the Invest Palm Desert program. What you are describing is still available through Invest Palm Desert. What we're looking at with just the de minimis is how we might use it for new development proposals, specifically that could offer a tax sharing. But the other, high wage move-in, startups, grants for the capital improvements, that funding is still available through Invest Palm Desert.
And at some point, maybe not now, since this is a narrow topic, I think it would be good for us to hear what we are doing to try to utilize those incentives, so that we're not just waiting for businesses to discover them.
Can I ask a couple questions? The 650,000, where is that? What did it come from?
That was programmed originally by the city council prior to COVID.
Okay, so those are leftovers.
Right.
So I'm just looking, if we were to do something with these 3 potential hotels that will be generating TOT, is there a way to take some increment of that TOT to put it back into a plan that will maintain some sort of balance in the Invest PD program?
With council's direction and action, I believe we can do that.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering if I understand part of the goal to attract people is to skirt the requirement for prevailing wages. And for me, that's a consideration as we consider the cost of supplies has gone up, the cost of everything has gone up. Why are we skirting the fact that human cost and human labor should also go up to catch up with the times?
This program doesn't address labor wages themselves. This is just something we want to add to the program that developers are interested in possibly using.
But that's part of what we're saying is one of the requirements for de minimis, that it's part of the attraction. That says they're not subject to. That's something that we're putting in writing. That's something that we're advertising and saying, if you do this, you won't have to. And I understand that it may be difficult to find the people that create the conditions for prevailing wages. But I think if we put that out there, it sets the low threshold. The low bar.
I think the purpose of this program, it's not necessarily to skirt prevailing wage. What we're seeing today is how do we continue to incent some of these smaller projects that we're looking at, where with our bigger incentives, we're seeing developers actually walking away from the incentive programs that we're offering because prevailing wage is essentially eating up 75 or 80% of those investments. So there is a carve out in the law right now that you can generate these types of incentive programs up to a certain threshold dollar amount. So that's the point. For a small business, a hotel, this may end up ultimately from a practical perspective, reimbursing them for some engineering costs, building permit fees. I mean, that would practically be how they would use it, but it's not necessarily to offset the cost of prevailing wages. So we're trying to be as creative as possible to incent these folks to keep them building here. In order to keep generating that TOT, but it's not a substitute for prevailing wage. It's just currently taking advantage of a carve out in the law.
All right, let's hear about the Fred Waring paving project.
Am I on? All right. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. I'm going to briefly discuss the Fred Waring Pavement Rehabilitation Project occurring between Monterey Highway 111 over the summer and fall of this year. The pavement rehabilitation on Fred Waring in this area is necessary because of the street surface is exhibiting signs of rutting, alligator cracking, and other deterioration, which indicates various failure of the asphalt and subgrades. If the roadway is not replaced, it will soon develop potholes and other significant failures. There is also increased need, given an increased need for the project, given the increased current and future volumes of traffic that travel the road. In assessing roadways, we typically use the PCI, which is a pavement condition index system. In using this street section, we had in 2022, we had a full assessment of all the streets, and that gave us a overall city average roadway PCI of 77 through the city, which is actually a really good average overall. To give some context and some perspective with Fred Waring, the full section average is about a 61 PSI, which gets into your poor to failing range. And some of the sections within that larger section are in the 50s, which is failing and in poor condition. The work will be a full depth reclamation with the street being pulverized to a depth of 13 inches. And then 6 inches of that material will be taken off, and the remaining aggregate will be compacted with a new pavement and asphalt laid on top of that, 6 inches. The project will result in rehabilitating the street sections, repairing storm drain lines, and bringing curb ramps and sidewalks into compliance with ADA requirements. We anticipate the project construction to take approximately 75 working days or calendar days. So we built a timeline with this timing in mind. We're also examining the potential for adding incentives into the contract for the contractor to finish ahead of the agreed upon schedule. As we know, this is a very focal point. Within this timeline, you can see we essentially have the 75 calendar day right in August, with construction set to begin in August, which is 2.5 to 3 months. So we've essentially built in the communication, the overall plan with that construction timeline in mind. With this such a significant thoroughfare of this nature, we know communication is key, and it affects a lot of residents, business owners, and drivers alike in this area. As far as the go back one. So we've already begun the communication plan. We've drafted the Palm Desert the Engage Palm Desert plan page with all the various project details that will be in it. This month, we'll establish the lines of communication with key holders in the area, key stakeholders, and send out mailers and start scheduling meetings. We'll proceed with those meetings in July with those impacted business owners and residents and others who are interested, and then that contract will come before you in July. Again, we have that timeline of August to actually start the work and the project. These are some of the communication channels we'll use in putting out the message. Obviously, press releases and media engagement, Brightside newsletter, Engage Palm Desert, of course, with the project pages, our city website, social media, mailers, in-person meetings, of course, and then our weekly administrative update. We'll also have on-site message boards, things of that nature, several weeks ahead. More than likely, we'll probably, for a project of this nature, 30 days ahead of the scheduled work. And then obviously our public affairs team and our business advocates will help us in getting out the message as well. So that's the overall information. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Nestande.
Yeah, so in terms of Fred Waring, that's a very, very busy intersection street, of course. Will traffic still be going in each direction, but in a limited, or is one side of the street? What's the traffic pattern going to be?
Yeah, it'll be limited. There'll be portions of the actual project construction where we'll go down to one lane. As far as it being on the base or the gravel, we're not going to allow over 3 days of that condition in the overall project and construction timeline to occur. So we're hoping to really minimize any of that kind of interruption, but it will, with a project of this size, there will be some interruption, but we will have reroutes.
Okay, and then Westfield Mall is in that near vicinity, and that's, well, it's not even called Westfield Mall anymore. With all the influx and change there, maybe this is for you. Is there a contact person on this who would?
Yes,
would-
Eric has been forging relationships with the JLL property managers, so we'll be sure to reach out to them and coordinate that, make sure that they can communicate to all their tenants what the ingress egress is going to look like in that area, as well as the other shopping centers that are adjacent to Town Center Road and as well. So we'll canvass that area, hold in-person meetings, and we'll also be reaching out to the neighbors as well, the residential neighbors.
It needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other part that Jess mentioned early on too is we really haven't had a history here of using incentives to try to incent contractors to finish their projects early. And we wanted to be sure that you were on board with us. We've asked our legal team to help us formulate that kind of a plan and put that potentially out as a bid addendum. We just wanted to make sure that you were okay with us taking a look at that and potentially writing that in the contract, given the nature of this roadway.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I finished writing my copious notes here.
May I make a comment? while
Sure.
you're doing that? Love that idea. Love that idea. Love all the extensive efforts to communicate. I'm sure you're at peace with the fact there will still be people who profess to be surprised. So love the message boards, because that's one of the hardest things to miss. So doing that in a sufficient period before there's actual impact should serve you well. I have a key request. When the project is going on, please, let's not have any message boards that say, expect delays. Number one, everybody knows they can see that they're delayed. Number two, it's not helpful to businesses. A sign that says expect delays might just as well say, don't shop here. It's a pain in the rear end. So please, no expect delays. Businesses open is a positive message. Mayor Pro Tem.
I think that's a great point. And should you need a second, I also second the incentive for early completion. My question is in terms of the logistics. Is there any plan on starting east to west or west to east? Is there a traffic analysis of which one has higher traffic so that part can be conducted in August where we have less traffic on that? And in addition to the notices that the work will be going on, I think it would also be very helpful to have the suggested alternate routes put in place sooner so people can start adjusting their commute times. If you've got your commute timed of where you're going to be and pick up your kids, et cetera, I think that would really help make that transition for everyone a little smoother. Thank you.
Okay. And as far as some of the logistics of phasing and kind of where we start, we'll get into that a little bit more as we work with the contractor when we send it out to bid, and then we'll come back with you with that when we go to award the contract as well.
Yes.
All right, thank you. You may have covered this or this may be somewhere else, but it's so much easier just to ask you. What's the total cost of this thing?
This right now, our estimated cost is about 3.4 million. And we have allocated that's through our Measure A funds and our gas tax. Okay.
And a big thank you to you and the entire public works staff. I guess you're here representing them. Because the excellent condition and maintenance of Palm Desert streets is one of the things newcomers comment upon most. And all you have to do is travel a bit outside Palm Desert to see some pretty stark comparisons. So as difficult as it is to disrupt people's lives, it's in a good cause. So thank you.
Thank you.
Does that conclude our study session business?
Yes, it does.
Everyone, please come back here to open our meeting at 3:00 before adjourning to closed session. And does that still need to happen in the ACR? Okay. See you in a bit.